Looking to buy a business, at some point you might decide, well, what do I offer to pay for the business? Obviously, you could choose to pay exactly what the person that's selling the business is asking, but I can tell you in most cases, people offer something different, and it's usually not more, it's less. But you got to go back to that person if you're going to offer a different price and say, well, I came to this because of whatever. Or you might even ask them, well, how did you come up with the price for the business? There's a multiple that people apply towards the earnings of a business as one way of determining the value of business. Look, this is Brian Stevens with the Thinking Outside the Box series from BuyBizUSA.com, where we say when you buy a business, you begin a dream. And I'm hoping that this series of really short little videos are going to be useful to people who are looking to not get ripped off, but make a great investment so they can take care of their families, their lives, their communities, employees, and have a great time with what they're doing. And I really mean that. So here's a little summary on what multiple to use. Now, there's a couple ways that you look at valuing a business. And one of the most easy ways that people use is they say, well, how much did the business earn? And then what is that multiple that most other people have paid for it? And I'm going to apply that. I'm going to see if that makes sense to me, if that makes a reasonable type of price. Now, how much the business earns, it's thought of in a lot of different perspectives. We're not going to get into that today. But there's net profit, and there's seller's discretionary earnings, which is what I'm going to think about mostly in this one. There's a multiple of the gross sales. There's EBITDA, EBIT, blah, 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 all these factors. But I'm looking at that multiplier right now that, let's say we're talking about seller's discretionary earnings, all the money that one hardworking worker can earn in that business if they take over, they work 45 or so hours a week or what have you, and they're going to run the business and not spend extra money on a fancy car or what have you, any write-offs. They're just going to earn all the money they can. What does that multiple look like? And that multiple, figuring out that multiple applies. This applies whether you're looking at EBITDA or any other factors out there, but what does that multiple look like? Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, I'm going to give you an example here of some contractors. These are some contractors that I pulled up, and I've got two columns here. As you can see, one is the sold price, what they sold for, not what they were listed for, but what they sold for compared to the gross sales. And I'm going to show you another one, which is what they sold for compared to that adjusted net, which in this case, I'm talking about the seller's discretionary earnings, all the money that one working owner can work in the business without having all these crazy write-offs that minimize the taxes. So it adds back depreciation, amortization, the salary to the owner, the net profit of the business, and all the other things that some owners write off in their business. Now, the sales price to sales, I'm showing you that because I've highlighted the high and the low, for each of these businesses, right? So let's say these businesses had about $1 million in gross sales. Well, this one sold for 0.847 or $847,000. This one sold for $85,000, almost a 10 times differential. So using just the average number, I want you to see, it shows some factors in there that take a lot of thinking and consideration, etc. Now, the net profit one is one that a lot of people use. Well, how much am I making, and what am I going to pay for it? So, people say, well, they sell between 2 and 3 times earnings. Well, look at these companies that are real-life examples. One sold for less than 1 times earnings. One sold for almost 5 times earnings. And you got to go back and do a little research and say, well, did it include a lot of inventory? Did it include some real estate? But we sorted through all that. There were some unique circumstances, and there always are unique circumstances. One argument is to pull out the outliers, the high and the low, and then look at the average. Or more commonly, what we use is sort of the median. What is that number between all these in the dead center? But I want you to think a little bit about why this is so important. First of all, just look at the adjusted net. Look at this wide range. I laid these same numbers up in this column in a graph. So you can sort of say, what is high and low. You can sort of see that extreme right before you in a graphic eye. Now, what I think a lot of people imagine if they're selling a business is that they are worth a lot. They're worth this higher multiple just because they know the business is so good, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe they're realizing they'd like to get to the middle, but they prefer to market prices at the bottom. Few people start off here unless they're going through some situation in which they need to sell. So sometimes people will say, hey, my spouse is being transferred to the other coast, or we're being transferred overseas for the military, and I got to get rid of my business somehow, and they do a fire sale. So that's why it's good to sometimes remove the outliers and still look at this median, but you still have this wide range of stuff out there. So you have to do some thinking about what affects the value of the business. Again, if you looked at the middle number on this one, it'd be around 3 or 2 point times earnings is probably right in the middle. This right 2. Okay. And that might be the good price, but maybe if you really like the business. So what are some things that drive the value in a business? I'm not going to go into a long term on that, but I'm just going to show you I'm just going to go through this one graph, and I'm going to talk about some other things. So imagine over the last several years, this is obviously an old graph, the sales have been ratcheting up, 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 up. Okay? So they're at, this certain amount, but over this business, over the years, the sales are going down, 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 down. So, which one is more valuable, the one that's declining and the one that's going up, even if the end point of these businesses is at the same spot. Let's say they're both at, $3 million in sales. They're not. But if they're both at $3 million this year that you're looking at the business, would it be more impressive to see one that's going up and continuing a trajectory up, or one that's falling way down? All right. Now, if you're somebody trying to sell you the business, they might say, "Oh, look at the potential. I've just been tired and not working hard on it." But a smart person is going to say, well, "Look, we work hard to gain a little bit every year. We have systems and processes, etc." There's other factors, obviously, that if you think about it, would inspire you to think I'd pay more or less for a business. You could think of a person that takes 6 weeks vacation a year with their family versus the other business. If they're identical in almost any other way, and that person never takes a vacation. Or the person's the business, or whereas in another business, the person is in the background, the employees are running the business and are at the forefront of leading the company, and the owner is just making executive decisions and driving the overall influence of the company, but is not the face of the company. Right? There's all these other factors, and we go into those on a sales driver conversation. But I want you to just sort of think about these numbers. So what do you do with all that? I'm going to pull a real life format. We use peer comps a lot of times. This one is a comparables of a particular business in the surgical supply manufacturing. I happen to pull this one up because I'm working with a company right now. The gross revenues for the businesses of these 34 that they looked at ranged from 1.3 to $8.7 million. The revenues were very nice, and these were the sale prices. These are the revenues. These were the earnings between $368,000 and $3.3 million. All right. So what we did is we started off to talk with the seller of the business, and we said, well, these are really interesting numbers. We can see that they sell at times the earnings, or the seller discretionary earnings, 2.5 to almost 4 times earnings. If we look at the median, the mean, which is the average, you add them all up and divide by the number of listings, and you've got this number. And the median in this case is quite close. They're very similar. We often look at that middle number because it takes away from worrying about extremes on one end or the other of the spectrum. In this case, they line up pretty well. And we go to the seller and we say, okay, we're going to list this business for 2.8 times earnings, and we'll go from there. So they might say, I think my business is worth more because the sales are going up or what have you. But so we can price it accordingly. But you yourself need to look at data like this, the peer comps, the data. Business Brokers of Florida has an MLS system. There's a lot of different resources, and we can help you with that out there. And get the data of really knowing what you're offering. Anyway, I don't want to belabor this any more than I already have. I just want you to realize that you're going to hear people say, these businesses sell for X times earnings. Besides getting to know what earnings are, you need to know what that number is, where they got it from, and what you really believe you should be using when you get to that point. Okay? This is Brian Stevens with BuyBizUSA. You can reach out to us at info@BuyBizUSA and make your dreams happen. Again, thank you for listening to Thinking Outside the Boss series, a series that are just dedicated to helping people make great decisions for their business. Take care. Bye-bye.